The battle over trade continues to advance between China and the United States, with the U.S. attempting to apply further pressure on the Chinese economy and the Chinese enterprises. As far as the impact on the United States, what has happened with imposition of all kinds of restrictions on Chinese products and Chinese technology. Now the latest is restricting U.S. investment into Chinese companies or work with them on some critical sectors such as chips, semiconductors, and biotech. The impact has been, number one, U.S. companies losing one of the biggest markets in the world for advanced technology, that is China. So the impact for the U.S. has been threefold. One, losing the Chinese market. Two, China is being forced to accelerate its development independently of technologies which are being restricted by the U.S. And that acceleration has been picking up pace of late. And the third, of course, as far as for U.S. consumers, inflation. When you go against the trend of higher efficiency by going against globalization, increasing inefficiency, and imposing all kinds of duties and tariffs on Chinese products, the sufferers are the U.S. consumers. Inflation, we've seen this happen in the last several years now. U.S. inflation has been horrendous because of the action of its government. Not only has this had major impact on the U.S. economy, U.S. consumers, and U.S. companies, and its impact on the Chinese economy and the Chinese companies. For the world, it's been very, very significant. Regarding what I was saying before, in terms of globalization and higher global efficiency and distribution of labor, what we see is disruption of supply chain all over the place because of U.S. sanctions, duties, and so-called friendshoring. What they're doing is now making it even more difficult to have improved logistics, supply chains worldwide by imposing restrictions on Vietnam and Mexico as well, including restricting Chinese investments in Mexico and Vietnam. How can you do this? These are sovereign countries which are trying to improve its economy and do its best to improve employment and livelihood of its people. This is hegemonistic domination that is thinking only of the interest of its own and does not concern itself with the well-being of others. And we've seen it already, the end result. The end result is losing Chinese market by U.S. firms. And this is already happening in many sectors, including electric vehicles, including semiconductors, including even telecommunications equipment. These are things which were dominated by the U.S. for decades, and now they've lost the Chinese market. Not only the Chinese market, they will lose other markets as well. We see this occurring on a global basis, where Chinese products with its own technology, its own efficiency, its own supply chain dominate a number of markets now. What China is doing now in terms of responding or getting ready for the taking over by Donald Trump as president of the United States, one is continue to improve its supply chain, its logistics, its manufacturing, and continue to be more efficient and supply the world with abundance so they could come at a lower price for all. That's one part. For example, in semiconductors, China's export of semiconductors for the first 11 months of this year has gone over 1 trillion RMB. That's an amazing number if you look at it, because it's been subject to U.S. sanctions and restrictions for many years now, the semiconductor sector. Now, the other part is China's response has been, for example, the anti-monopoly investigations against NVIDIA. That's another way of responding. And the third way, which we see, is restricting exports of a lot of rare earth metals, very specialized metals which are used for very specialized needs, including military use. The restriction on its export is very significant for even the U.S. military industry. And then also the announcement by 4 different associations, including, I think, the Semiconductor Association, Telecommunications, Automobile Association, and the Internet Association, announcing that it warns its members to be careful about security risk of importing U.S. chips. These are all very important and significant measures being taken by the Chinese government and the enterprises to counteract continued pressure applied by the U.S. on Chinese enterprises and Chinese economy. It's really unfortunate that the U.S. does not see how this is only a lifting rock to drop on its own foot. It hasn't had the effect that it's seeking, and it ended up with the opposite results. China will continue to advance despite the pressure. Hopefully, the U.S. leadership, the U.S. government can come to its senses and work collaboratively with China rather than continuing to pressure China.